Hello and welcome to the third and final installment of my three-part watch through of Revolutionary Girl Utena. It's not the final in this entire series, but I am finally finishing Revolutionary Girl Utena. Welcome to My Anime Academia. If you are new to this series, this is a weird place to start because I am on part 3 of this watch through. I have a link in the card, probably down below, to take you to part 1 of Revolutionary Girl Utena, or maybe even part 1 of this series where I started with Yuri on Ice. But long story short, I found a Den of Geek article that described the 10 best queer anime, and I realized I'd only seen one of them. So here I am, watching through all 10 of those anime to learn a little bit more about queer-led anime. Today I am finishing my watch through of Revolutionary Girl Utena. This anime is 39 episodes and it has 4 story arcs. The first story arc is 13 episodes, the second story arc was 11 episodes, the third is going to be 9, and then the final one is the last 6 episodes. So I'm watching these last 15 in one chunk here just so I can get right through to the end and I'm not making a video about 6 episodes at the end here. Yeah, Revolutionary Girl Utena, if you're not familiar and you just wanted to jump here to get to my take at the very end, it's about a middle school girl who wants to be a prince, who ends up getting swept up in duels to possess the Rose Bride, who has the ability to bring about a revolution to change the world, to end the world. We'll find out. There's definitely an apocalypse song that happens in almost every episode, so I imagine that she has the power to bring about the apocalypse. But yeah, I don't know if there's really much more for me to say up at the top here. I'm excited to finally get to the end, hopefully figure out what the hell is happening, because, oh, let me tell you, it's confusing. But anyways, that's more than enough rambling on here. Let's get to future me, comfy on the couch, watching some anime. Okay then, third arc, first episode. So we got Himemiya's brother driving the car, and then shows Saionji something that makes him go, oh, I want to fight for her again. So I have a feeling that this arc is going to be working through the student council once more, possibly. Then you have the elevator in the middle of the stairs, which is like, oh, there was an elevator there the whole time, even though they're calling it a gondola for some reason. But like, they say that it takes them to a different place, but it takes them to the same place. What else? Himemiya's older brother is really creeping me out, and is it implied at the end what I think is being implied at the end? Because, oh. Also, cars everywhere, yeah. The cars were the theme, sticking up out of the ground for some reason. And then the sword disappears, okay, and Utena has a sword in her chest, just like the student council did. Okay, sure. Oh, also new apocalypse thing with the gondola, with them getting naked together and changing clothes in the elevator on their way up. Okay then. And I really like their little like crescent beds where they're holding hands, staring longingly at each other. And Himemiya saves Utena. She's not allowed to get involved, and she jumps in and saves Utena. And I almost forgot to talk about the homoerotic bed scene between Himemiya's brother and the student council president, where they're mirroring the homoerotic bed scene between Utena and Himemiya. Alright, so we've established the pattern. going to be student council member gives up on dueling, then student council president comes and sets them on a car ride with Himemiya's brother, who shows them the end of the world by cartwheeling onto the hood of the car with his shirt open. And then they decide to duel again, but now they're pulling the swords out of their own chests. Mickey's sister dressing like Himemiya. Interesting. And pulling the sword from Mickey's chest. And Mickey's sister seducing Himemiya in the car while they're dueling, distracting him. Interesting. All right, it would not be a arc of this show if there wasn't a ridiculous episode with Nanami. In this case, she thinks she laid an egg. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that one. Okay, so the fencing club captain came back and immediately starts dating the girl that Jory's in love with, which, and then ropes her into the whole end of the world thing as his bride, which I guess the guys are coming with the bride to fight now. Well, Mickey's bride was his sister, but there's this thing has lots of brother sister weird shit in it. Anyways, was she polishing Jury's sword then? Huh. Okay then. So he forced himself on Jury, which is gross, first of all. But interesting. So he was being gross and sleazy and only dating Shiori, I think that's her name, because he knew it would get Jury angry enough to duel, and he wanted Jury to win the duel so that Jury could have the ability to get miracles. But assuming that the Shadow Girls are supposed to be telling the truth at the end, then he was sick and on his deathbed and came back because he was in love with Jury and wanted to help Jury win the duel. At least that's what I take away from it. But I mean, he's still sleazy, but it's, I guess, an attempt at a redemption arc-ish. I don't know. But it's interesting that then Shiori runs after Jury at the end. Maybe those feelings aren't as unrequited as we're led to believe. So Utena's falling in love with Himemiya's brother, it seems like. But then he takes advantage of her, which is really creepy and gross because she's in middle school and he's an adult. And then he sleeps with his fiance's mom, which is also gross. I knew that he was giving me weird vibes when I first saw him, and ugh. Well, that ended abruptly dark, but yeah, I guess. So, an episode about Nanami finding out that her brother's not blood related to her, which that's definitely an anime trope. The girl that's in love with her brother that then finds out that he's not actually related to her, which is still gross. And then, yeah, she catches Himemiya's brother sexually assaulting Himemiya on the couch. All right, then, that was a lot. With Nanami dealing with what she saw on the couch, or saying that she saw it through the lens of her reality, and it might not have been what she thinks it was, but I don't know. And then, yeah, I foresaw her getting in the car thing, yeah, that makes sense, and dueling. But then at the end, where it's like Tauga is like, oh no, we actually are related by blood, but we're not related to our parents. We were both adopted. Just makes the fact that he tried to make out with her in the car that much more creepy. That he knows that they're blood related. Ugh. Also, just him and the chairman hanging out in bed half naked together again. Just, yeah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that episode 8 was the end of this story arc. Episode 9 is probably going to be a clip show, and then. So it was mostly a clip show, but I guess Utena. It's implied that she slept with Hamemiya's brother. So he's still taking advantage of her, which is. Ugh. So the Shadow Girls are the drama club. Makes sense how they know everyone's business. Yeah, so we get the two versions of the story of the Rose, with Hamemiya having sacrificed herself to save her brother and being in eternal torment. Prince Dios can't save her because he's her brother, so she's the only girl he can't save. And it's nice to finally see the actual scene where she meets her prince and not just the ornate memory retelling of it. But yeah. Also, Hamamiya's brother. Ugh. Yeah, he's definitely become a prince that she can't believe in because. Ugh. Oh, so they're treating her like a damsel in distress to try to get her to choose to be a princess instead of a prince, is what I'm gathering from this, where she needs to reject this temptation in order to be the prince for the Rose Bride. There's a car honking outside. And yeah, she's like this close to remembering. I have a feeling that in the final duel, if she wins, she'll remember. That's my prediction. Also, apparently, the men's shirts just fly off when they're hanging out with other men. It's not weird at all. Neither is that photo shoot on the car. Alrighty, so she wins the final duel, which was expected. After he seemed like he genuinely wanted to protect her, but yeah. And now, at the end, the cliffhanger with her walking out to see Hamemiya naked with her brother. I have this like idea in the back of my head that the Rose Bride that she's been interacting with is not the real Anthe, who is the one with all the swords coming out of her, but an extension of the older brother. But I'm not sure. We'll find out very shortly. Utena and Hamemiya talking about the future makes Utena realize that she wants Hamemiya in her life. And then Hamemiya tries to jump off the roof, which leads Utena to go take the power and see her prince for Hamemiya's sake. Okay. Penultimate episode is a little bit of a clip show, but also a lot of exposition. It's like exposition the episode. Yeah, so the tower doesn't really, or the tower top is really the dueling arena. And then Hamemiya stabs her, turning on her in the end, because Hamemiya, I assume, wants to be the Rose Bride still, or wants to protect her brother. Yeah, let's finish this out, shall we? Well, that was an interesting ending. So finally being selfless was what opened the gate, going there for Hememia and not as the brother was going for power for himself. And she sacrifices herself to free Hememia, it seems. Like, yeah, she doesn't get to like pull her out and then she disappears to have everyone forget about her, but Hememia finally gets to leave the school and she's freed from being the Rose Bride, which is as happy of an ending as I was expecting this to have. Yeah. So, we'll do a little wrap up now, shall we? All right. Wrapping up Revolutionary Girl Utena. Part 3, final part. Finished it, finally. I'm going to start by summarizing what I think happened, since it is a little obscure and some things are sort of hinted at rather than said. It feels like it's the story about how, while Akio was this princely figure, Himemiya sacrificing herself in order to protect him, he lost all of his princely attributes and became selfish. At least that's like the general gist of what I pull away from it. He spent centuries setting up these duel systems in order to try to take other people's strength to open the rose door. But in doing so, he was only being selfish and he was taking other people's drive, other people's princeliness, and trying to use it for his own devices. And it never worked for him because he wasn't working for it himself. It wasn't his goal to get in there to save Himemiya. It wasn't his will that was forcing its way through there. He was taking the swords, taking the princely will of the duelists that he forced through these dueling processes. At least that's how I'm sort of interpreting this. And then the reason why Utena can get through the door is because she's going there for selfless, princely reasons. She wants to save Himemiya. That is her goal. So because she has pure intentions, the door opens for her. I like that this tale that really centers around breaking these ideas of gender roles in the prince and princess chivalry realm. It's all about breaking these gender roles. And in doing so, it also breaks with the tradition of the happily ever after. You don't get and they lived happily ever after. She doesn't technically save Himemiya, but she does save Himemiya. She doesn't pull Himemiya out, but she gives Himemiya the agency to leave of her own free will. And I really like that subversion of the ending as well as all of the rest of the subversion that happens throughout. But yeah, you have this cast of very bisexual characters, it seems. Like Tauga, I think you pronounce it. The student council president is constantly hounded by all these girls that he doesn't feel anything for. He finally decides that he's in love with Utena, but in the meantime, it's very heavily implied that he's sleeping with Akio. And possibly Saionji. It seems like everyone was sleeping with Akio, but if there's one thing that I don't like, it's his whole abusive relationship with the younger girls. There's one thing that I'm not really interested in watching in my queer anime. It's older men forcing themselves on middle school girls. It's kind of gross. Maybe the definitions of middle and high school are slightly different in Japan, but it's still an adult and a child. And it's really uncomfortable to watch. I get how it's being used to demonstrate character traits. It's being used to demonstrate how Akio is this selfish person now, and he is no longer this prince who's there to save young girls, but instead he's a predator preying on them. And I get that it's for Himemiya, she has that whole thing where she's like, I let people use me for their own ends. I let people abuse me because I felt like my pain didn't matter. Or like she was so wrapped up in her own pain, that in her own sacrifice, I guess, that she decided that she didn't matter, which is why she was letting this happen. And it's really great to see her walk away from that at the end. To see her finally value herself because someone else, I mean, it is because someone else valued her in Utena, being like, no, you deserve happiness. But at the end of the day, it's nice to see Himemiya say, you know what? I do deserve happiness. I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the trying to give sort of redemption arcs to these guys that treated women awfully in this, honestly. Like, I'm blanking on his name, but the fencing club captain who comes back to take back over, and it's apparently because he's in love with Juri, who's a lesbian and never going to love him back, and wants to make her fight for the miracles that she wants in her life, and does it by forcing himself on her and stealing the woman that she's in love with. Manipulating the woman that she's in love with. And it's like, however noble his intentions are, he still did some really shitty things. And yes, it did end with Juri finally being able to let go of that locket, but I don't know. I don't like these like attempted redemption arcs of these characters that are objectively horrible people. Like, the student council president does objectively horrible things. He forces himself on his sister after convincing her that they're not actually related, even though they are. And then in the end, you're supposed to be like, oh well, he loved Utena. What? Did he? No. He doesn't love anything. He loves himself. And I don't think there was anything noble in him in the end. Even Mickey did things for extremely selfish reasons. All of the male characters in the show are extremely selfish. I feel like a good portion of this story is actually the story about a bisexual girl coming to terms with her sexuality as she's growing up. At least that's what I take away from Utena's story, is that she sees this ideal princely figure that she must be in love with because that's what you do. But then she decides to emulate that because she wants to be strong. So she's subverting gender roles there, but she's also slowly falling in love with Himemiya. And I would definitely argue that this is a love story between them more than just they're close friends. They can't say it's a love story. Even though they were explicit with Juri, they still... That's a side character. It's a little bit easier to do that. Most of the queer elements in this are very much hinted at. But it's definitely her coming to terms with the fact that she has these feelings for Himemiya. And in the end, that's what drives her, is her love for Himemiya. So there are things that I like and things that I don't necessarily like about Revolutionary Girl Utena. I like this subversion of gender roles. Like, I can see how a young person who is struggling with their gender identity could very easily see themselves in this show, in this subversion of gender roles. And that's a great thing. I love stories where we fight back against these preconceived notions of what men and women should and shouldn't do. And it's also fantastic to represent multiple, I would say, queer relationships. Not all of them healthy. And a realistic look on what it's like to be a queer person in love with a straight person. Or to be a confused person who doesn't really understand anything about your own queerness, trying to figure out what your feelings for someone are. Those are great things to explore. But we're exploring them in this setting that is all about conflict and control, and it's framed within these extremely abusive relationships, and it's hard to watch it sometimes. Like, a good portion of it is pretty hard to watch, and I would say definitely not something that I would go out of my way to watch. It's a fantastically told story. Your villains are horrible people, and they drive all of their points home really well. But I'm not a fan of watching abuse. So while there are amazing points to this show, it's never going to be one of my favorites. And I'm not saying that every story has to be happy, but incestuous sexual assault is just a little bit beyond the lines of what I want to watch. All in all, it was a very formulaic show, but that comes with the territory of anime, especially 90s anime. So I'm not judging it harshly for being formulaic and repetitive. It's a mixed bag of experience. Well, I think that's really what I have to say about Revolutionary Girl Utena. There were some very interesting, good moments in there, along with a lot of really uncomfortable ones. But what's your favorite anime with queer protagonists? Put it in the comments below and I'll most likely add it to my list next week, probably. Next video is going to be on the next one in this series, which is number 6, an extremely hard anime to find. So good luck to me finding that. Anyways, thanks for joining me once again, and have a good one. Can you hear him drinking his water? You done? Siren, siren, siren. I live in a city.